Welcome back to How to Craft Fair. This is episode number 11 in the Craft Fair Booth Review series, where I take a look at a real craft fair booth submitted by one of my subscribers, and we're going to break this down into great detail, analyzing the booth in 10 different segments. We'll take a look at things that they're doing well and should continue to do, and then also identify areas of improvement. Along the way, keep your booth in mind so that you can apply these tips to your booth to take it to the next level. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so for today's video, we're going to be looking at Stephanie and Ashley's booth, and their business name is Made by Moonlite. And a large portion of the booth is going to be made up of earrings, but there's actually several different types of items within the booth, okay? So we're going to cover a few different kind of sub themes within their booth. They are located in Tennessee, so another vendor in Tennessee covering that southeast pretty well again. And interesting background with their booth is that they are primarily Etsy sellers. And when you see their booth, I think you're going to be impressed by it just in general, but when you take into account that their main focus is actually on Etsy instead of in-person events, they have a hell of a booth. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So kind of cool. I actually stumbled across their business by flipping through TikTok and, was just searching by hashtags, craft fairs or something like that, and came across their booth, and I had to give them a big compliment and kudos because it was just, a tremendous looking display and setup. So that's kind of how we connected. But yeah, really excited for this review. I think there is a lot to look at here that a lot of newer vendors can learn from and kind of be inspired by. So really excited to dive in. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so this is the booth. It's a 10 by 10 outdoor space, and we're going to go ahead and just dive right into the first segment, which is displays. Now, there's pretty much three sides to the booth, right? So on the left side, we have these taller wooden displays. And then in the middle, kind of by the checkout area, there's a little bit going on here as far as displays. We have three smaller displays. And then on the right side of the booth is where, like, the more complicated setup is dedicated. So let's kind of just break it down by the three segments. On the left side, we have the taller wooden displays, and they're doing a good job of holding all the earrings, okay? So let's dive into another angle just to focus on those in particular. And they're doing a really good job of just covering a really, really large portion, okay? And it's a nice, like, flat backing area to look at so that when you're looking at these, it's really the only thing that you can focus on, So really doing a good job of just keeping the distractions at a bare minimum and making it all about the items, okay? And the way that they have these set up on these lines, and then it's almost kind of like a clip that's hung down from these lines, is really nice. It adds a lot of character. Let me zoom in a little bit so we can take a little closer look. So yeah, like I said, they're, kind of strung out on these lines, and it just gives it kind of like, it's almost like a throwback, like a clothesline looking feel. So it's kind of homey, kind of cozy. It just looks really nice, the way that they've chosen to do this. Also, a big segment of this display is a mirror, which if you have a product like this where it's, fashion related or you can wear it, having a mirror at the booth is an absolute must. So the fact that they have this covered and kind of built into the display is really nice. And then we have a nice little quote here: "Bad vibes don't go with my outfit." Very cool. Just like these little personal touches, like these little quirky things are always a nice thing to add into your booth because it shows that you have a personality, so always a good idea to kind of mix those in where it's, where you can do it and it's not distracting and whatnot. Okay, so let's go ahead and cover the middle section now. So we have a zoomed in view of that right here. And this is kind of like a dual purpose, big smile from behind the booth. This is kind of like a big dual purpose table. Okay, so it's acting as the checkout area, but then it also does have a few displays as well. So we have a little like basket over here, really cool, lots of character, very dark, which contrasts the light items well. And these are for stickers. Okay, so that's taking care of those. And then we have a board here where the magnets can stick to, and this is kind of like a vertical board that's stood up. And then next to it, we have one that's horizontal, where there's magnets that are on this horizontal board. And then finally over here, there are mini plant hangers that are hung up, and they look really good. You know, there's a few different styles, and just looks really nice. So really good job of, you're going to start to kind of notice a pattern with this booth, okay? And one of the biggest things that you'll notice is that there's a color theme happening, and then there's like fonts and signs, and it's all tied into a theme, okay? So although we're going to be dealing with some different items, like just for example, this table alone has stickers, magnets, and then the plant hangers, all right? So you already have 3 different styles of items here, but look at how they're different items, but how it all belongs with each other, how the theme is carried on through no matter what the item is. That's extremely important when you have a booth that kind of plays around with a few different types of items, okay? When you have a theme that's a little bit more broad instead of something that's like super specific. If you have a booth that consists of items where you're kind of covering different spectrums of arts and crafts, it's very important that you establish a theme and carry it through the entire booth, because that is going to be what provides the consistency of the experience inside the booth. All right, so now that we covered a little bit of this, let's go ahead and look at the right side of the booth, and that's kind of like our third panel. And we have a couple of different angles of it, so let's kind of look at the diagonal angle here. And right away with the displays, another thing that you're going to notice is that there's natural earthy colors involved. It's kind of like an earth palette, so you have like these muted natural shades and tones that provide a really nice, like safe base and just warm and inviting, the color palette at this booth. So really smart decisions on, when things aren't natural, like the wood, when something is painted, go with these tones that are just comforting and warm. Okay, so now let's take a look at the angle that's more direct on. And this, as I said before, this is the part of the booth that's kind of like the busiest and covering the most product. So a large portion of it is still earrings, okay? So there's many different types of earrings, like made from different materials and things like that. But they've done a really good job of separating the different types of earrings, okay? Because they're made from different things. So it's a good job to have them separated, especially if they're going to be priced differently depending on what they're made from and all that. So there's charm earrings over here, and this is like a Lazy Susan or whatever you want to call it. It's a spinning display, okay? So there is a backside to this that people are able to check out if they want. So these earrings over here are marked. Then we have some up here, some in the middle, and then over here now we have a bookmark area, and it's kind of cool. It's like hanging in a basket, risen up off the table. Okay, so good thinking there as well. Not just setting it on the table down here, because if they did that, it would not show as well as it does now with it kind of propped up 4 or 5 inches off the table. Same thing over here with the mini oil diffusers, and that's in a dedicated basket for itself as well. Then this one back here, this is the only one that I would say try to get it up slightly higher. Okay, so the front side here, so we have a couple of designs that are blocked by these signs. Okay, so you can only really see like this earring set and then this earring set, and the rest are kind of blocked. So what you've done here, I would kind of mimic it here if possible, and try to get this up about 3 or 4 inches maybe, and then that way you're able to see all the designs. On the table here, we have a bunch of basically wicker baskets, and they're containing different things. Okay, so we have keychains and bag charms, clay earrings. Then there are coasters, okay, made from cotton rope, wristlets, and then assorted items. Okay, so this is it's marked as a $5 basket, and kind of look through it and pick through it, and any item in there is $5. Okay, so that's kind of like the catch-all for everything else, basically. So now let's back out and absorb the booth as a whole. Okay, so again, we're looking at natural tones on all the displays. So if it's colored, it's going to be like that earth palette, that soft earth palette. And then there is a lot of natural wood and then wicker. Okay, so really, really good job of keeping the booth 100% natural. Really the only thing that is not a natural thing is the wire baskets. Okay, but yeah, I mean, excellent job. I think the displays look tremendous, and the way that you have them staggered and placed, it's interesting, okay, because it's not just repetitive, and it just is very, very pleasing to the eye overall. Really not a whole lot of advice for the displays. That's going to be a little bit of a theme here with this video, and by the way, Steph and Ash, like I'm going to have to be kind of like really nitpicky with my advice, because I really had to kind of like dig to find things to offer up advice on, okay, because you are doing such an excellent job. So yeah, as far as your displays, absolutely excellent. Okay, now we're going to dive into pricing, and pricing is laid out on signs, and it's kind of cool because the way that they've done this, like in these videos, I always tell people to go one of two ways with your pricing. Either mark things individually, or do your grouped pricing where, just say for example, like this basket we talked about, everything in this basket is $5, so this one sign covers everything that's in here. Okay, so that's like your grouped pricing. But what they've done is, in a lot of cases, they actually have like a group pricing sign, but then they also do have their items marked individually. Okay, so I'll show you a good example over here. If we zoom in on, just for example, like the earrings, there's a sign, and it says what the earring is and what it's made out of. And then it'll let you know that, okay, they're individually priced. And then right there, you can see the little price tags in the corners for each earring set. So they've basically covered both the bases, both the techniques, and they've done it with one sign. Okay, so they're letting you know what the item is, what it's made out of, and then the pricing of it. They're letting you know what it costs, what it's made out of. So really, really good job. I mean, it leaves absolutely nothing to guess. Basically, there's no guesswork for the shopper involved. Very, very clearly laid out. So big fan of this. Very, very nice. And as we start to look around the booth, we're going to see that branded signage, and this is very, very well done because it incorporates their business color. You're going to notice this mint green color is the same color as the business sign back here. Okay, so they've made their pricing signage an extension of their theme, and it's branded. So when you start talking about high level booths and vendors who are excelling, these are the kind of things that they're thinking about. And this kind of attention to detail, it's a reflection of the quality of the booth, So again, these are the kind of things that you want to start thinking about if you have a pretty solid booth, but you really, really want to start taking it to that next level. So again, now as far as pricing goes, it's everywhere. I mean, you can see the pricing signs everywhere, and it covers all of the different types of items. Like wherever there's a group of items at this booth, there's also a sign to go with it, letting you know what the price is. So, I mean, you literally couldn't do a better job than what's happening here. It's very, very obvious. Here's the sticker sign. Here's the magnet sign. The other magnet sign here, so these are a little bit more because they're more involved. And the plant hangers, like everything is just so clear, and that's exactly what you want to be doing. Okay, so now we would dive into our general signage segment here. And there's not a whole lot to cover because of the fact that their pricing signage is dual purpose, okay? So normally, like the common signage that you would look for at a booth is signage that would say what something is made out of or just the name of the products. And these are all being covered on these signs. Okay, so you have the name of the products and then also the material that the product is made from. Okay, so cotton rope coasters, clay earrings. It's all already laid out on these signs. Okay, so the fact that they're using this dual purpose signage, it's basically killing like 2 or 3 birds with one stone, you know? So very, very smart on their part. Again, there's no guesswork involved. Okay, now let's talk about the marketing signage. Okay, so this might be one of the few areas where there's a little bit of improvement to be made. So when you think about marketing, there's a whole bunch of like different aspects of marketing that you can be doing at your booth. Now, the most obvious one is like a business banner or a business sign. Now, they do have that covered with a really, really nice sign behind the booth. And here it is right here, probably about 4 feet wide, I would estimate, about 4 feet wide by maybe about a little under a foot high. So it's not tremendously big, but it's also not like so big that it's disruptive or stealing the spotlight from the items. It's very, very tasteful. They have carried the font through to this sign. The color is the color that's being used all throughout the booth. And also the sign is wood, so you can kind of see the wood grain through it a little bit. So really they've made sure to tie in all the crucial elements of the booth that's existing throughout the rest of the booth into this sign, and vice versa. You know, the sign is reflective of the booth and the booth is reflective of the sign. So just really, really good job and very good planning too. Like this kind of stuff, it doesn't come overnight. You know what I mean? Like it takes a lot of strategy and calculation to start coming up with like a vision for your booth. But like once you have that vision and you know, you want to carry it through, this is kind of like what you're looking for. Like you really want to carry it through all aspects of the booth, and they're just doing a tremendous job of that. So now with other forms of marketing, what you can do is have business cards out, okay? Because again, at the very beginning of the video, we mentioned that, you know, Steph and Ash do Etsy, okay? And their primary focus when it comes to their crafts is their Etsy shop, okay? So I would have business cards that have a QR code on it. And like, for instance, I know that you have a Linktree. Okay. So a Linktree, if you don't know what that is basically like you get your own custom URL, like your web URL. And then it basically is a portal to all of your social links and your important links that you want people to go to. Okay. So it's kind of nice because instead of trying to push and advertise like 5 different links, like here's my Facebook link, here's my website link, here's my Etsy link, all you have to do is just promote that one single link, the Linktree link that you get, and it takes people to a page, like a landing page, where they can immediately go to whatever they want. They can go to your Etsy, your website, your Facebook, your YouTube, whatever. So that is a Linktree. And this business in particular, Made by Moonlite, they have their own Linktree. So that could be something that you could put on the business card, have the QR code direct to the Linktree, and then that way you pretty much give people instant access to all of those things, you know? Then on the other hand, if you solely want people to focus on the Etsy, then you could have the QR code go to Etsy. I would definitely consider adding like a cute little sign or something somewhere at the booth that says like find us on Etsy and have the QR code, because of the fact that you push your Etsy very hard and that is like a primary focus for your business. But that's probably all I'd really say about the booth. Maybe one other sign that you could consider, maybe somewhere on the pay table, maybe like right here by the checkout area where people are going to be standing for a minute and kind of taking it in when the transaction is happening. And maybe you could have like a small sign that tells like a sentence or two about how you two came together to start this business, because this business is run by two best friends. Okay. So that in itself is really cool. It's really nice to see that, where most craft fair vendors are just individual people, where they themselves operate their booth. If it's more than one person, most times it's going to be two family members, maybe a husband, wife, maybe siblings, or maybe like a mother and daughter, something like that. And then when you have more than one person and it's two friends, I think that's probably the rarest of multi-person operated booths. And that in itself is a really cool story, so I would share that somewhere at the booth. I would share that. And I think it's just like inspiring, that, two friends got together to make this happen, and not only to decide to have a craft fair booth together, but to have one that's put together so incredibly well. So again, it's a really cool story, and I would definitely share it. Okay, so now let's talk about vertical space at the booth. Now, vertical space is definitely an area of strength at the booth. Pretty much when you look at any part of the booth, they're doing a phenomenal job of creating different eye levels, so not only the tabletop stuff, but then also kind of like a mid-level and then an upper level. Okay, so there's different tiers that they're working, and they're serving different purposes too. So just this table, for example, let's zoom in just a little bit. Now this middle table, for example, the plant hangers are occupying kind of like a middle and upper tier. And then you have the upper tier over here that has like the payment information, what forms of payment they accept. And then down over here on the lower level, we have 3 or 4 different things to look at, so there's, the shopping bags that are really nice, and then the stickers, and the 2 different kinds of magnets. So literally like this one table alone is doing a great job. Now, if we come over here to this table, I mean, the entire thing is vertical space. I mean, it's just absolutely tremendous, Then on the right side of the booth, we have kind of like a mid-level to upper level being covered, and that's with all earrings. Okay. And then now if we start to look at the top of the booth, they've done a good job of using props. Okay. So the only purpose of items like the lights and like the vine or the garland or whatever you want to call it, it's all basically just adding to the vibe and the experience, And if you took these elements out of here and there wasn't the lights or the vines or these, kind of like tassel looking things up here, it would make a difference. If these all weren't here, it would certainly look a lot different. You just wouldn't have that like interesting top part of the booth. So even small details like this it's just the sign of a really, really good vendor, a sign of somebody who's really thought it out, thought it through, had a vision, executing it. And it's not something to the point where it's going to take anything away from the booth. But if you took it away from the booth wouldn't have quite as much coziness and hominess. You know what I mean? So there's like a balancing act there when it comes to adding props to your booth. You have to do it like in a tasteful manner. You have to do it you got to hold yourself back a little bit, and you can't go overboard. Okay. And when you do it, think of the colors that you're adding to the booth, and are they going to complement your items and your displays? Are they subtle, or are they going to be too much and too loud and vibrant? There's just a lot of things that you got to consider, but when you do it right, it just adds such a nice look to the booth. But yeah, as far as vertical space, I mean, literally from the top of the canopy down, it's very, very well done. Just, again, another element and another segment of this review that they're absolutely nailing. Okay, now let's talk about colors, contrast, and texture. So we have touched on a little bit of this so far. So basically, the colors of the booth, obviously we have a bright white canopy with bright white tablecloths. Okay, so you got a little bit of a tie-in there. And then we've talked about the signage having that like mint green feel throughout all the signage. And then as far as the displays, we either have natural wood or then we have kind of like those earth tones that have been painted. So again, like there hasn't been anything at this booth where they've like strayed away from it and it's kind of like, something that feels out of place or it's like, that's kind of funky. There's none of that. They've carved out a vision and they're executing it very well. So again, just very, very good job when it comes to colors. And the contrast portion of the booth is also very good. So you can see, I mean, even in this pulled back shot and photograph, the displays are a different color from what the item is, okay? The only one that's a little bit kind of doesn't have great contrast, if I could point one out in particular, it's probably this one right here, okay? So there's kind of like the white board and then there's magnets and those are mostly white, okay? So that's really the only one. So I don't know if you could maybe swap this part out for maybe a color like this or even this kind of like grayish green. But that's really the only one. Okay, so out of the entire booth, basically, that's the only one that I see where it's kind of blending a little bit. But when it comes to texture, everything is solid color. Okay, so that's really important to remember too. Now, there's not any. If you take a look at this booth, like sometimes people feel like they have to have a table runner or they have to have like some kind of like pattern on the tablecloth in order to elevate their booth and make it look, refined and next level. And you really don't. Like this booth here proves that you really do not need any kind of runners or textures or anything like that on your tablecloths. And with the solid white, it's clean, it looks good, and it's doing the job of being the supporting act and letting the items shine, okay? Because it's all about the items. And sometimes it's very easy to be tempted by wanting to have like that extra flair. Maybe it'll attract people to my booth or maybe you'll get some attention. Let your items get the attention. I mean, this booth is just extremely inviting. There isn't anything loud or crazy or big risks being taken. It's all about how can these items be displayed as comforting and warm as possible, So I just wanted to kind of point that out because I like the white tablecloths in this, and I like the textures in that they're safe. They're very, very safe textures, and you didn't take any unnecessary risks. So you've basically set yourself up so that the items do the talking, and that's exactly what you want to be doing. All right, now this next segment is going to be the strength of the theme, and this segment is going to be very, very important to talk about with this booth in particular, and I hope that it really hits home for a lot of the vendors watching this video, because this booth is proof that you can have a booth that has a whole bunch of different types of items, and yet it is very, very clearly one theme, okay? So at the booth, we've seen earrings, we've seen stickers, we've seen magnets, we've seen plant holders, there's even a miscellaneous area, and then there was bookmarks, oil diffusers, coasters, wristlets, right? So you guys, we literally have like probably at least 10 different, maybe even 15 different types of items at the booth, okay? But look how this is so very clearly one theme, okay? And this literally could not be executed any better. And it's very encouraging and inspiring to see a couple of vendors make what they want, okay? Because it's not like they had a bunch of different interests and we're like, you know what? We're going to make the booth, but we have to settle on one thing because the booth has to have like one item and one thing. They're making what they're inspired to make, and they're making what they want to make. And yet they've thought it through, and enabled themselves to have a setup that, although they're making from their heart and they're creating from their heart whatever they want to make, it still looks uniform, and it looks like it is all one booth. Okay, so it can be done. And in the past, like, I've talked about how vendors should basically try to stick to maybe 6 to 8 different types of items, like at the most, I mean, just for kind of convenience purposes. I mean, let's face it, it is easier to set up a theme and establish a theme when there's just 1 or 2 different types of items, right? But I've always said that it is possible to have a booth that features many different types of items. It's just a matter of making it happen. It's a matter of like coming up with a vision for your theme and just implementing it from front to back and side to side. Okay. You can't leave any stone unturned, basically, and this is a great example of it. So when we look at the booth as a whole, like, it's so clear that it's all one theme. So as far as the strength of theme goes, I mean, this is a 10 out of 10. This is excellence, so this is, again, what you're striving for when you have a lot of different items that basically are broad arts and crafts where it covers a lot of different spectrums, okay? All right, now we're going to talk about accessibility. And again, on the rare side, but this is going to be one of the areas where there's probably a little bit of room for improvement, okay? So when it comes to accessibility, we're basically talking about a few different things, like the safety for the shoppers, no tripping hazards, falling hazards, and then also literally accessibility, where, how many people can get into the booth and are they able to view your items from a distance and that kind of thing. So let's cover the last portion that I just mentioned first. Okay, so are they able to view the items from a distance? And in that regard, with accessibility, I think you're doing very well because you're utilizing the vertical displays, so people can kind of see your things from like a standing distance, from a few steps away. Actually, from where this photo was taken, it looks like it was a few feet outside of the booth, and you can clearly see that this booth is loaded with, earrings and magnets, and you can see what some of the items are from back here. Okay, so in that regard, accessibility is good, but we have a concern with these guys. Okay, so the bases to this display are very, very large, and in the way that they're constructed, it's a pretty big tripping hazard. Okay, so although I doubt that it's ever actually happened, that somebody's actually like fallen, it's creating a situation where shoppers are probably going to like point out to one another, like, say if a couple walks in, like, oh, just be careful, don't trip on that. So like it's a moment where the shoppers are focusing on this so that they don't trip and fall instead of looking at the items. Okay, so when there's a situation like this, when there's like a tripping hazard, not only are you worried about the actual act of somebody tripping and falling, but you're worried about their attention leaving what you hope their attention stays on, and instead they're, making sure that they don't fall. Okay, so there's kind of 2 parts to that accessibility element. Is, you want to keep their attention on your items, and then you literally just don't want them to fall. Okay, and then the tablecloths, I think they're okay. They're a little bit pulled down a little bit far, so I would just make sure that there's like no bunching of the tablecloth up at the bottom. That's really the only thing. Is just maybe just something to consider for the booth is a textured tablecloth, the ones that basically are kind of contoured. They're like a stretchy spandex type of thing where they just are contoured. That might be like a nice upgrade. You do sacrifice a little bit of the storage space underneath the table when you get those, because you're able to put a lot more underneath these since they hang straight down instead of being contoured in. But it's going to solve like 2 issues for you. Okay, so the first is that you won't have to worry about this rolling up thing, and then the second thing is that your tablecloths are pretty wrinkled, right? So you're really not going to have to worry about that with the spandex and stretch ones, because they basically just, you don't really see a lot of wrinkles in those, So yeah, that might be like one upgrade to consider that would pretty much like kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So just something to kind of consider there. The other thing I wanted to talk about with accessibility at the booth is because there's a table on this side, and then there's a table over here that's acting kind of dual purpose as a display and checkout table. And then this area here is pretty much just, it's for you to get in and out as the vendor. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of walk back there or whatever, and that's cool. But that is some real estate that's unoccupied with anything. And then over here on the left side of the booth, we have, again, these bases to this display are eating up quite a bit of really valuable real estate in the booth, especially with where this is happening, okay? Because there's only like a certain box, like basically right here, for people to kind of like walk in and look at stuff. Okay. So what was a 10 by 10 area has now been reduced to maybe about 4 or 5 feet wide by about 6 feet deep or so, something like that. So that's one of the things to kind of consider with the booth is, I think the configuration is good, table and rack, or, board, whatever you want to call it. But I really think a lot of it comes down to how these are propped up. I don't know what we could do to enhance this. Like, the only thing I can really think of is like some sort of flat metal base, and it has things that kind of come up. So it's kind of like a T, right? Like an upside down T. Like you'd have the flat part here, but have it flat on the ground so that people could literally step over it or whatever. So a flat part, and then coming up to hold the big boards in place. Okay. Basically, it would kind of be like this if you cut out this pizza slice, basically. Of course, I have to use like a food analogy. I'm so ridiculous that way, but you know what I'm saying is like if this was kind of like a flat thing where it wasn't just eating up so much room over here, and people could kind of step on it or over it. Like if it was like metal and flat, people could even just like step on it, and it wouldn't be an issue. But yeah, that is like the one concern, is that, you only have so much space at the booth, and every square foot is just so important. And these are just such big chunks to kind of give away. You know what I mean? But that's probably it. That's probably all I'd say as far as accessibility. Again, you're doing a few things that are really well. Mainly, your setup is good where people are able to view your stuff from a distance. Like if they're walking by and they're at a show and they're kind of walking down the aisle, all they have to do is glance over and boom, they immediately know what like 80% of the booth is, So being able to see products from a distance is also kind of like an accessibility thing, because one thing you don't want to do is have everything laid down on a table so that people literally have no idea what you're selling until they're actually stepping into your booth, which they're not going to bother with if they can't see what you're selling. So yeah, good job. All right, now we're going to talk about general use of space. So I think this is, again, definitely above average. Your displays do a really, really good job of maximizing your table space. I mean, we've looked at a lot of table setups in these reviews so far, and this table right here it's probably the best one that we've seen so far. It just does such a tremendous job of offering height, offering some variety in displays, but also, again, making sure that it's one common theme. So really, really good maximizing your space over here. The fact that this middle table is dual purpose is fantastic because, again, you're maximizing space by using it for more than just one thing, okay? So you have some displays, but then you also have like a really, really nice little checkout area. Very well done. And then over here, the big boards, they do a good job of holding a lot of product, okay? And then again, this is a little bit of a multi-purpose display as well because we have the mirror. So again, as we touched on before, when you're selling items like these, it's very, very important to have a mirror, okay? Again, this is probably just our area of improvement when it comes to general use of space. So like we said, there's only so much real estate and every square foot is important. So if there is a solution to, maximizing a little bit more space, probably going to start with these. Otherwise, you might have different opportunities to reconfigure the booth, like to set it up in a different manner. But I don't really see like an issue with the way that you have your booth set up. I think you're getting a lot of product out there, and there's a lot for people to pick from, and there's a decent area for them to kind of step in and then, step back out. So you could probably have 4 to 6 people in here before it gets to the point where it's like you can't get any more people in there, you know? So maybe try to brainstorm of a way to get that to like 7 or 8 people, you know, like, is it possible for me to get 7 or 8 people in here instead of just 4 to 6? So that's kind of like something that you want to brainstorm on, but yeah, otherwise I would say you're doing really good. Okay, now we're going to talk about the eye test, and that's basically the 2 or 3 seconds that somebody's walking by the booth, and what are you doing as a vendor to get people to stop and to walk into your booth. And this booth just passes with flying colors. I mean, just really, really inviting and clean and warm, well thought out, well presented. The quality of the items look fantastic. There's a lot of variety to pick from. There's so much in here that's very appealing. The bright white canopy on all sides on a sunny day, you can see what it's doing. It's almost like the inside of the booth is glowing, you know? So even when it comes to things like picking out your canopy, white on all sides is a really intelligent choice, because when you hit these sunny days, the inside, it just has such a nice natural light. And even if you close in your booth, you know, look at the inside. The entire inside of the booth is in shadows. It's not like there's light coming into the booth. It's the fact that the light is hitting this canopy and it's essentially just dispersing a really, really nice natural light. So all these little details that we've talked about in this video add up to what is a tremendous booth. I mean, I'm kind of running out of adjectives, but it's just really, really well thought out, you know? So kind of want to give like a little bit of a summary, a breakdown on maybe some things that could be improved. Okay. So there's not a lot. And again, I kind of had to be nitpicky here, but one thing that I did notice, and I didn't point it out yet during the video, so I'm going to make a special note to kind of zoom in here. Okay. Now on this particular set of earrings, you have them marked as $15, okay, for the embroidery hoop earrings. So it says $15 on the sign, but then the individual price tags say like $25. They say different things, okay? So they don't say, I don't think they say 15. I think that's a 2. That almost looks like 23 over here, and that's 25. So I was going to ask about that, okay? So like, is this a sale price for the event or what, you know? There's a little bit of a discrepancy there on the price. So that might be just one thing to kind of clear up, so it's, you know, crystal clear for the shoppers. And then we talked about, you know, we just covered the accessibility issue with the bases to these. So this could be improved. And then we talked about also just the smaller interior space. So maybe that could be improved as well. We did talk about the tablecloths, and they could either be ironed, okay, to get some of those wrinkles out, or you could go with the stretch spandex type tablecloths that are contoured, and then that way you don't have to worry about that. Or the fact that they were kind of rolling up or blowing in the wind a little bit, then you wouldn't have to worry about that either. So that could be a possible level up or improvement down the road. Earlier, we did mention that there's no business cards out, okay? And then a couple of marketing things like, you know, follow me on our social media and have like a QR code. So there's a little bit of room to level up with marketing, especially since you have a dedicated Etsy shop. You know, get something out there where people can hop on it on their phone and follow you on there, because I actually sent something out on my TikTok recently, and I asked vendors to tell me about shopper etiquette at craft fairs, and I asked them to tell me one good thing that shoppers do and one bad thing. And you'd be surprised how many vendors responded with, if you have a QR code out and people like are into your stuff, people will actually pull their phone out and they'll follow you literally right there as they're standing there. So it definitely is a way to generate followers on the fly, and and if that's the case, it's totally worth it to have a sign out. And that is really, that's really about it for the tips. There was one that we talked about here with this middle display right here. Probably would like to see this come up a few extra inches so that we can see these earrings and they're not kind of hidden behind these signs. But yeah, I mean, you guys, like I said, this is a booth to definitely be inspired by, and to just, again, to kind of just be reassured that it is okay to have a variety of items out there. Okay. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from this booth, is that it's validation that, yeah, vendors are out there who create what they want, and they don't necessarily just stick to one particular item or theme, and yet they're still able to pull it off. Okay. It can be done. So, yeah, Stephanie, Ashley, I really want to thank you for connecting and chatting on TikTok and stuff, and, sending the booth in for review. And even though this is a very, very well executed booth, we did talk about, some improvements here and there. And that just goes to show that craft fairs and being a craft fair vendor, it's endless learning opportunities. And even if you're a well established, very well thought out vendor, there's still little opportunities to level up and grow, So that's one of the things I love about being, like a craft fair, vendor and organizer and all that stuff, is that no matter how long you do it, and no matter how many shows you go to, there's always little tiny ways to still get better and adapt to times and techniques and things like that. So again, thank you so much for sending your booth in, and here are their links. Okay, so be sure to check out their links. Definitely check out their Etsy shop, and if you're on Etsy, give their page a follow and a favorite and all that stuff. Again, thank you for sending the booth in for review, and if you want to have your booth reviewed, check out my website, and that's where I have all the information on booth reviews. And sometimes I have the booth reviews paused so that I don't get too far behind, and it gives me a time to kind of catch up, so just be sure to check out my website before you reach out about a review. Okay, and if you've picked up some tips from this video, please like and subscribe. This is a great community of vendors who are very active in the comments section, and always are providing additional tips that I can't think of. So it's a fantastic community, and I love to see it growing. So please be sure to like and subscribe. To check out all the other booth reviews, click on the playlist above, and thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate every one of you.